Hello and welcome to Battle Ready. Thank you so much for watching. Today, Drake and I have been playing Warhammer not a long time. I mean, there's people who've been playing it for years and years and years, and are into tournaments and all that sort of thing. And that's not us yet. But it is something that we've been playing for about a year or so, and we've picked up some things along the way. And really, it's been such a great opportunity to connect, play a game as father and son, something away from screens. It's really been very good. And so if you are at all interested in miniature wargaming, specifically in Warhammer and Age of Sigmar, we thought we'd lay down our sort of 5 top tips for getting into it. Now this list is really for people that they want to dip a toe in the waters, but they haven't really bought a miniature before, haven't really played. Maybe they've been doing board games or video games or other things, but they don't have a whole lot of experience with miniature wargaming. So here are our 5 tips that we think are going to give you the best experience going in. We'll sort of alternate. I'll go first.
Mm-hmm.
The first one I have is play the army you think is cool. Or another way to say it is don't worry about what people online say is winning all the biggest tournaments. I can tell you that when I as a longtime board gamer, video gamer, I of course was interested in the armies that are going to win, right? I want to know what's the most powerful. And not only what's the most powerful, but I also sort of wanted to know what army is terrible. Is there an army out there that's just garbage? And if I start getting interested in it and want to play it, I'm just going to get crushed every time. There really aren't any armies like that, with I guess maybe the possible exception of Beasts of Chaos, or so I hear. But who cares? I mean, it's really the bottom line. If you find an army that you really like, maybe you think Nurgle stuff is just so gross and cool and you want to be part of that, it doesn't really matter how Nurgle's doing in the international tournaments, right? That's not where you're going to be playing, certainly not where I play. And so if you think it's cool, start going for it. Because one thing I've seen, I've played a lot of armies now, comparatively. I know there's people that played a lot more than me, but they're all fun. They're all sort of fun in their own way, and they're all cool, and they all do different things. And if you focus on an army that really speaks to you, maybe you like the heroicness of Stormcast Eternals, and that speaks to you, and so you want a bunch of Stormcast. Maybe you really love the lore around the Daughters of Cain, and so you really want to have like snake ladies and murder elves.
Maybe you like to go crazy sometimes, and maybe you'll like the Gloomspite.
Exactly. Maybe the idea of this amalgamation of barely sane goblins and trolls.
Yes.
You think that's really cool.
Yes.
Then go for it. Every army sort of has its own aesthetic, and if you play the army that you like, you will have a ton of fun with this game. And it doesn't really matter how good your army does at the worlds and the tournaments and the people that get big prizes and that sort of thing. Who cares? The idea is, at least for us, is it's something that we wanted to play with each other. Mm-hmm. We wanted to have a good time, and the power levels of the different armies is not that big of a factor. And in fact, when you're playing at this level, very, very casual level, they're, at least all the ones that I have experience with, they're all pretty balanced. They're all about the same power level. There's no crazy shenanigans that are going on. And while at a big tournament, maybe you see some lists where people are stacking all different kinds of buffs and really doing things that are going to ruin your day, at this level, we're not doing that. And so any army is going to be fun. So pick the one that's fun for you. All right, Drake, what is your first tip?
Well, technically, it's the second, right? Second tip.
Your first tip, our second tip.
Sometimes the dice are going to hate you.
Okay, sometimes the dice are going to hit you. What do you mean by that?
As in, you're going to roll really poorly all game.
Okay, and what does that do?
Basically, you just have bad luck that one day.
But is that a good thing or a bad thing, or why is that a tip?
I think it's a tip because don't get like, what is this? Over the dice.
Yeah, there's a lot of dice in this game, and on average, right, over the course of the game, your dice rolls even out. But on any given roll where your guy's up against their general and you need the roll. Who knows, right?
Who
On
knows?
that one particular roll, you might roll well, you might roll poorly. And I think Drake's absolutely right. In the moment, you say, dang it, the dice. But partly as you play more and more, and Jake and I just played our 50th game. Drake. Drake just. Played our 50th game. So we're, again, we're not super experts, but we're getting better at it.
We're halfway to 100.
That is what 50 is. And, you just make the best of it. And there's been lots of times when I've rolled supremely poorly.
He had 11 dice. 6 of them were ones.
Yep. And, that's obviously quite a poor roll. But, you ham it up, you make it part of the narrative. And it's really, for me anyway, when I play the game, I love to see the story unfold. I do my best to win, and I try to make smart decisions. But I want, if the dice tell me that it wasn't that guy's day today, and then he gets cut down in the next turn, that's sort of a cool story that you can, recall back later and say, hey, remember that time when, and it's
I
sort
do
of
remember
fun.
that time when Sigvald was murdered by ghosts.
When Sigvald was murdered by ghosts? He didn't want to be murdered by ghosts.
But he did.
But the ghosts got him. So don't worry about the dice. You just have to sort of recognize that the luck element is in this game and roll with it. Mm-hmm. Pun intended. All right, tip number 3. Start small. Start small. So, I have a habit sometimes of getting super into something. I have a very extensive board game collection that I've built up over the years. I play a lot of games. I know some people do the same thing with video games. Some people do the same thing with other things. And it can be easy, especially in something like Warhammer that's got such a rich history and where the model lines for some of the armies in particular are very, very large. It can be easy to just go down the rabbit hole and try to, drop $1,000 to get a couple of armies together and all that. And you don't need to do that, nor should you, especially when starting out. When you're starting out, start small. Find the starter kits. Things like right now it's the Dominion box or the various starters that are similar with, I think it's Extremis and Warrior, and they have one other one.
Warrior, Unknown, Extremitus.
And then before that, they had Soul Wars. We picked up a Soul Wars box.
That's how we actually started.
They came out with a box that was Caradron versus Tzeentch, and we did that. They had one that was Daughters.
I went through a Caradron phase right then.
Yeah, Drake loves Caradron. We did a Daughters versus Slaanesh box that came out for a while.
Slaanesh unfortunately died in the final battle.
Yep. And so that was sort of fun. But it's, get the little things, and then always look into the start collecting boxes. Those are often, not always, but often pretty good value. I mean, they're always better priced than buying those models themselves. The question is, do you want those models? Are they going to stay with you long term? And most of the boxes, the answer to that is yes. Not all of them, but most of them, the answer to that is yes, and you'll get good use out of the models in those boxes. And start there, and just build up over time. Drake and I had put together just these starter sets, and then we sort of, over time, expanded to 1,000 point armies, and then over time to 2,000 point armies. So that's all, and then from there, you can always continue collecting, and then you have more to mix and match and do whatever you want.
Aren't they releasing 3,000 point armies?
Well, they're releasing 1,000,000. I mean, you can play whatever number you want. If you wanted to play a 3,000 point army, you could.
You can play 1,000,000 point armies.
For sure, that'd be a lot of models, a lot of plastic on the table.
A 1,000,000 point army is probably this times 17.
That much?
For one army.
It's probably more than that. But that's the idea, is start small, make sure you like it, because it's easy to drop a lot of money in this hobby. And make sure this is something that you like. Make sure you have people you can play with. Make sure that they want to play with you. And
or you can just play against yourself. Not that fun.
Yeah, it's not a good solo game. But once you have that going forward, then you can start to expand. But so my tip is don't just dive in and buy everything and then regret it. Start small, get yourself a starter set, see if you like it, see if your friend likes it, see if your kid likes it, and then build up from there.
I've also once tried to fit all 9 of our armies. Well, 8 is Dad's, 1's my Gloomspite. On this one mat, no more space for one model.
Yeah.
No more
We
space.
we had a lot of models on the table that day. All right, Drake, do you remember your next tip?
My next tip was don't stress over every rule.
Don't stress over every rule. All right, why is that a tip?
Because if you do that, your brain's gonna hurt, and then when your brain's gonna hurt, you won't want to play.
So there are a lot of the basic game of Warhammer, of Age of Sigmar, let's say, Age of Sigmar, the basic game is super simple. You could teach it to somebody in 5 minutes, 10 minutes maybe, and they got it. You know, there's 5, 6 different phases, you run it through, you know how combat works. Easy. It is a very, very simple game at that level.
Yes.
But
When you get into the actual abilities,
yes,
it hurts your head.
every unit has different abilities, and this unit has an ability that triggers over here, and this unit gives a buff to everything within a certain distance, and if this unit gets a buff from something, then it can do something. And then you layer on top of that command points, and you layer on top of that endless spells and how they work, and you layer on top of that now heroic actions and monstrous actions. By the way, I had 2 monsters last game we played, and I forgot monstrous actions the entire game.
Yes. Also, once in our very first battle report, Z's versus Harpon, I played it smart with my Lord of Change and smashed that Realm Shaper engine.
That's right. So, but there's just so many. There's just so many rules. And on your first game, in fact, all the way up to our 50th game, we've never remembered them all.
No.
There's too many.
No.
Now, if you've ever played the one thing I relate it to is Magic the Gathering, where there's tons of card combos, and especially when you're into the tournament scene, which I did some local tournaments, which I performed decidedly mediocre at. I'm no great player. But you get a sense of not just what's in your deck, but what all the other decks might have, and you know sort of all the cards, and you get an idea of what all the different combos are going to be, and then the deck that you build, you're specifically looking for specific combinations of cards. And so it can be complicated in that way, where you're trying to put different combos together. Warhammer, or Age of Sigmar at least, is like that on steroids. It's more. There's more units. There's a lot more on the battlefield at one time. Different things are keying off of different units. You've got abilities on top of that. And then there's no, unlike a computer game, there's no computer keeping track of all of it for you. You have to do it yourself. And we have found that very difficult.
Yes, we have.
So I think Drake's absolutely right. Don't worry, but do right what you can. And it's true that as we've played, we've gotten more of them.
Yes.
Right? We forget less and less as time goes on. And especially if you stick to one army or 2 armies, it becomes easier. Right? You get more and more familiarity with that army. You know what it's supposed to do more and more and more until finally you've got it down. I think one of our downfalls is that I have a little bit of army wanderlust, and I like to play different things every time, and that also means I don't always know all the rules. Whereas Drake, who likes to play Night Haunt
and Gloomspite.
So
I know the rules better.
He's gotten a lot better at those rules.
Those 3.
So I think that's absolutely a critical piece. Don't go into it thinking you need to know every rule, and if you miss a rule, that game has an asterisk. Every game's going to have an asterisk. And you just have to say, oh, shoot, last round, this guy should have made an attack that I forgot about. Oh, well. And then just move on with the story, move on with the game, because rewinding is oftentimes very, very difficult.
Yes, we every time we've done it, we've had to look at the video.
Well, not every time, but that's something that we have done before. Okay, last tip number 5, and this is one I want to throw out, especially if you look at things online, and that tip is Games Workshop is not a perfect company, and they certainly make mistakes, but I really don't think they're evil. There's a very odd thing in the Warhammer community. It reminds me a lot of the Star Wars community, where the way you show how big a fan of Star Wars you are oftentimes is how much you hate it. If you can talk about all the ways you hate the new cartoon or the new movie or the new whatever, then that makes you a true Star Wars fan. And I think there's a little bit of that, a lot of bit of that in Warhammer. There are some people that play Warhammer and they love the game and they play it as often as they can. They paint the models, they do all the stuff, and they will go on message boards and just hate on Games Workshop and hate on the game and the changes and everything else. Games Workshop's a company. They want to get paid. They're going to charge what the market can bear. This is just how it works. And it's no different than, McDonald's or your grocery store or
Target,
or if you're into video games, what the video game companies do with
Nintendo.
DLC, and everybody's doing the same thing. So it's not as though Games Workshop is uniquely evil in some demented way. I know in the past there have been some questionable choices, some questionable business direction, and they suffered for it. I mean, Warhammer sort of went into a dark place for a long time, from what I understand.
Well, both in lore and in real.
Yeah, I'm talking about in real, the company.
I also will note that I have been able to decipher only one rumor engine. That was the one, because it was in January 2021, where if you look at the Killaboss on Great Nash Tube, if you got the Dominion box, in that rumor engine, it shows a picture of its foot on the little piece of like outcropping stone. That's the only pic that shows. And when I look at that, I think, that's the Killaboss.
So, like I said though, Games Workshop's not evil. They do bad things. A great example is the Cursed City board game, which they were supposed to make a ton of, and then they didn't, and then it was just gone with no explanation. Now, there's a worldwide pandemic going on. I know shipping containers are a big deal right now. There's lots of reasons, and they should have just come out and said, we couldn't print as much of these as we wanted to. Or we have some kind of snafu and turns out this isn't going to happen the way that we thought. Get it while you can or whatever. But instead they sort of stealthed it on social media without telling people. Not a good thing, right? That's not a good thing. And I think you can legitimately criticize a business for doing things like that. But just recognize that the company isn't perfect. But in this game, they want to sell you things. They want to get your money in return for plastic mens that you can play with, little toys. And so if you just recognize that, they're just making their business decisions and sometimes they're wrong, I think you can avoid a lot of the online rage that frankly is just mystifying. I don't, maybe I just don't love Warhammer as much as some of these other people love it, but it's a little bit misplaced. And I think we need to have a little bit better perspective about the company that makes little plastic toys for us to march around on pretend fields.
Yay!
So those are our 5 tips. Just to recap, play the army you think is cool. The dice are going to be a factor. Just learn to live with it and roll with it. And then, of course, that also helps you.
Was there a pun intended?
Of course. And then, of course, you learn better generalship. And as you become a better general and piloting your army, the dice, you can mitigate a lot of the poor effects.
If you love Caradron, pun intended, pilot your army.
Pilot your army. Start small, starter kits, start collecting, 1,000 point armies. Make sure you like it before you dive in too deeply.
I would honestly start with 500 point armies, not even a full 1,000, just to make sure
that would be
like
fine.
It.
750, I think, would be a great little skirmish point number for you to start with. 750 points would be fantastic. Don't worry about getting every rule right. You're not going to get every rule right for many plays, and just have fun, right? Don't worry about it. And then lastly, Games Workshop is imperfect, not evil, and sometimes things happen. I think if you go into this game with those perspectives, you are setting yourself up for a fantastic time, really enjoying the game, really loving the narrative experience, really loving the time you can play with your opponent, the time you get to spend, in my case, with my son. And it's overall just a fantastic experience. And those are, I think, some of the best ways, if you're thinking about, dipping your toe in the water, those are some fantastic ways to really get started with it and see if you like it. Any final thoughts?
Wah.
Wah, of course, wah. Well.
Something that the game loves to include.
Yep, that's all. It's Warhammer is what it is.
Yes. It's Warhammer Kamurudi site. That's how the orcs say it.
That's
I did read it on Here We Go.
All right. Well, hopefully this has been helpful to you. If you are interested at all in dipping your toe in the water, I would encourage you to do so. It's been a fabulous experience for me and Drake. And thank you very much for watching. This has been Battle Ready.